Welcome back. You're still live on News World by Channel Newsroom Africa, channel 405. Now, we're still talking all things World Food Day and the many issues related to food in and around Africa. And to help us sort of unpack all these different matters, I'm joined in studio by Trice Mazwi, who's an activist for organic lifestyle, or at least for organic living, as well as Professor Sylvester Mpandleni, who's Water and Research Commission sort of official from that end. So to the both of you, thank you very much for carrying on this important conversation with us. Trice, you had alluded to the idea of the commercialization of food, and I never really thought about it until you said it, right? It was always expected that food is something to be sold for a profit. But food is also, you know, as you rightly pointed out, linked to some of the most basic human rights. You know, people have a right to proper food and things like that. How does that idea feed into the problems that we are having right now with food security?
Okay, so let's take it to the discussion that happened on Wednesday, where different countries are talking about wastage of food. And let's look at what that is. In most cases, it's us overbuying food and keeping it past its sell-by date and then throwing it away. The second one is food that did not meet the sales standard with the retail stores,
Right.
because it either has flaws. Let's look at an orange, for instance. If it's got scars outside, the orange inside might still be intact, but it does not look good on the retailer's shelves. So that orange will then not go into the retailer store. Then it will then be counted off as not good enough for retail stores, but it's still an orange. So if legislation says an orange that is at this standard grade A, B, or C can be sold or otherwise be discarded, that is wastage from the farmer. But we've got children who don't need to know the grades of fruits and veggies, who will sleep that night hungry. That talks to the issue of commercializing food. If there was no issue of this orange being sold, that orange would have been consumed by a human being. Because an orange, we don't eat it if it's infected inside. But if the skin has got flaws, that's nature. We've got flaws. We've been burned when we were young. We've been scratched when we were young. We don't discard a living organism because it's got flaws. We discard it because it's not good for consumption. So a lot of those situations, you find them a lot where a retail store will say, this food is going to expire in, say, 3 days. So we need to take it off the shelf. And there are laws that are saying you cannot give it to people to consume in case they get sick, and so it will not come back to the retailer. This is food being dumped. So you see how the commercialization of food wastes food indirectly because of the laws in place.
Yeah.
So if we start to look at what life is about taking care of, regenerating, and killing and using as and when you need. So first of all, you don't remove a fruit from a tree and put it in a box so you can distribute it 5 months later. Because the transport and the distance and the packaging and the refrigeration and all those processes in place, that temper with the process of nutrition, that temper with the process of freshness, of consumption, of diseases in the process of transportation. So we need to understand that once we stop the process of buying food, and each household has its own trees and its own food there, we start to cut down on transport. That's carbon footprint. We start to cut down on packaging. That's carbon footprint. We start to cut down on petrol. That's carbon footprint. We start to cut down on refrigeration. That's energy. That's carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So we cannot say we are unhappy with the planet not being able to give us food, yet our actions at every corner, at every movement that we take, are directly destroying the planet.
And it's funny you mentioned the ideas of carbon footprint. In just a moment, we'll be having that very conversation actually with Dr. Kevin Cam, sort of looking at the ideas around climate change and ways through which we generate power. So I'll use that moment to punt that conversation. So stay tuned. But Professor Sylvester, let me bring you in here. The value chain, it sounds to me, affects some of the most vulnerable members of our society the most. I mean, for instance, if I've got the option of constantly going to buy the freshest foods from elite stores, no mentioning of names, where there's a perception that there's, the freshest of the kinds of brands that we're accustomed to. But if I don't have that option, I usually get, the food that would be considered to be at the bottom of the barrel, speaking about grades, for instance.
Yeah.
Is there an appreciation that this probably has a disproportionate effect on poorer people and mostly poorer rural people?
Yeah. Look, the issue is, as a society, we need to think out of the box. Not everybody will be able to go to those formal markets and buy vegetables, fruits, and so on. We have initiated, a program. That program, it has been divided into two categories. We've got a program that focuses on school-based initiatives. For example, in Mamelodi, we've got this school-based project wherein we are planting different types of vegetables to complement the feeding scheme program in those different schools. But over and above that, also to start teaching those young kids to say, if you take agriculture as a career, there's life. So we are killing, two birds with one stone. Yeah. We are producing food inside those schools, but at the same time, we are sort of, mentoring those kids to start to look, agriculture in a positive way. Remember the perception out there is like, when you talk about agriculture, it's like carrying in the hoe and go to the field. But the technology within the sector is very attractive. Nowadays, we use Earth observation, to monitor water use, water management, and so on. That's first category. Second category, we've got a program that deals with, vegetable production, planting vegetables in the backyard gardens in order to solve some of the issues that she has highlighted. And it means that those households need to be self-sustainable.
Yes.
If you look at the Statistics South Africa report, it shows that 1 out of 4 households goes to bed with empty stomach. And the unfortunate part is that we cannot wait for government to bring everything. This is about teamwork. She spoke about, knowledge that has been generated. I would like to work with her, especially with regards to the implementation, because we generate that knowledge, and we manage it. Then we need to identify strategic partners in order to take this knowledge forward. Over and above that, we need to sit down with our policymakers and implementers to say, guys, this is the product that we have. How do we make sure that, we move forward? If we like to address all the obstacles within the value chain, but if we are not communicating, there will always be those, gaps. And we'll keep on pointing fingers and so on. They are very good programs. There are guys who are doing well, who are trying their level best, firstly, to create job opportunities for community members, who are guys who don't want to move from urban to, from rural to urban areas, because there's a problem. That is why, on the other side, as Water Research Commission, we are now running a lighthouse initiative or flagship program called Water Energy Food Nexus, trying to make some connections among those 3 sectors to say you cannot separate water from energy, energy from agriculture, and so on, because there's serious implication, not only at technical level, but also at policy level. We're doing, very well with our partners to make sure that whatever activities that we are driving, not only as an organization, but as a country, we will try our level best to make sure that, we meet the targets that has been set by United Nations with regards to sustainable development goals.
Yes.
You know what happened with the Millennium Development Goals.
Yeah.
We
Not
couldn't
much.
meet some of those targets.
Yes.
And we don't want to fall into the same trap with regards to the sustainable development goals. That is why we are saying we need to harmonize our activities. We need to recognize where there's trade-off, synergies, harmonization, and facilitation. That is why it is very, very important. She might be sitting on the other side of the fence, but I need to take the product that we're generating and make sure that, we implement such kind of products.
Right, and you speak about working in harmony. I can't help but reflect on patterns of travel, for lack of a better term, that we observe in the world over. The reality is people are migrating to more urban areas. If there's going to be a need for a form of subsistence farming, where households themselves are planting crops and are making sure that they're able to essentially sustain themselves, how do we ensure that that kind of lifestyle can happen in urbanized areas?
Yeah.
Because if I come from the Eastern Cape and I live in Alex, for instance, I think the last thing on my mind will be to try and bring the kind of planting of the crops that I had in the Eastern Cape to try and survive in Alex. Do you know what I mean? Those are the kind of concerns, at least, that are cropping up for me. I mean, do we find any kind of solutions being brainstormed to deal with that particular challenge?
I love that question so much, because after having done a road trip in the beginning of March, we went to all the 9 provinces where we raised awareness about global warming and what organic lifestyle is in terms of coming up with green economy solutions to combat those issues. So one of the solutions that we came up with the team for SA Transformer is to look at what the Industrial Revolution is going at. Let's look, I know that every time you hear 4IR, you hear IT. But IT is one industry. Industrial Revolution affects the social era, all of it, with all economic structures involved. So when you look at the needs, you look at energy. We need renewable energy. You know that even if we have artificial intelligence, we're going to be stuck because we're going to run out of power, right? Because the transformers are going to heat up and take long to cool down because of the temperature. And so we're not going to use all the intelligence that we're going to be creating if we focus only on IT. But if we look at Industrial Revolution with regards to, we're going to run out of food in the near future.
Sure.
What is this Industrial Revolution saying to young people? We say to young people, start to use your innate intelligence as your equity. Start to look at business around innate intelligence. For instance, there's young people who are stylists right now. If you look at business, it is informed by innate intelligence. And we say that's a green economy solution. Look at what you want to do, look at what impact it has on the economy and on the planet and on the environment. If it's got zero impact, then that's a business you pursue. So one of the solutions that we are talking about is getting 1 million transformers to join us. And these transformers are going to be looking at green economy solutions development. One of them is providing food to the cities through employing women, rural or urban, that have 1 door size or 2 door size of space, and say, you plant beetroot and cabbage, the other one plants potatoes and whatever else. And what they then do is bring it together. This is now organic food prepared by women in the city and in the rural areas that can then be taken as baskets to the cities.
I do have to leave it there, unfortunately. Sadly, that's all the time we have for. But thank you very much for coming through. That's, of course, Trice Mazwi, who's a metaphysical scientist and founder of Organic Lifestyle, as well as Professor Sylvester Mpandleni, who's from the Water Research Commission. To the both of you, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ayanda.
Thank you.
All right, now, scientists say that the window is closing to save the planet. We'll tell you a bit more about that and a whole lot more after this quick break. Do stay with us.